Security! Arrest this woman immediately. The voice cut through the buzz of the 21st floor breakroom like a knife. And before anyone could process what was happening, a glass of cold water arced through the air and hit Danielle Brooks square in the face. The room froze. Phones stopped scrolling. Conversations died mid-sentence. Danielle stood there, soaked, her takeout bag dripping, the scent of fried chicken and collard greens mixing with the sharp smell of office disinfectant. Let me ask you something: if you were standing there, surrounded by people, and someone humiliated you like that, what would you do? Would you walk away? Would you defend yourself? Or would you just stand there and take it? Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if stories like this of injustice, of truth, of the moments that reveal who people really are matter to you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Because what happened in the next 3 minutes would end 5 careers, and expose a truth this company had been hiding for years. That July afternoon had been unforgiving. Atlanta's air was thick enough to taste, clinging to skin and settling deep in the lungs. The sun was relentless, baking the sidewalks until they shimmered like molten glass. Even the cars idling at stoplights seemed to sag under the weight of it. Northbridge Technologies rose from the concrete like a monolith. 27 floors of tinted glass, each panel reflecting the burning sky. Inside, the lobby was a different world, crisp, cold, and humming with the subtle confidence of money well spent. Danielle Brooks stepped inside, jeans and a soft gray t-shirt absorbing the artificial chill. She didn't carry a briefcase or a badge. In her right hand, a simple brown paper bag from Busy Bee Cafe, still warm, the scent of seasoned chicken and fresh-baked cornbread trailing behind her. Her mission was simple: surprise her husband, Marcus Brooks, with lunch. Maybe catch a few minutes together before heading back to her own small non-profit job across town. She had done this before, in other offices, other buildings. It had never been a problem. But Northbridge wasn't just another office. It was a hive of calculated ambition. Every corner gleamed. Every face moved with purpose. People here didn't pause for strangers, they assessed them. She took the elevator up to the 21st floor, unaware that the moment those brushed steel doors opened, her day would take a turn that couldn't be undone. The 21st floor breakroom wasn't the quiet space she imagined. It buzzed with the leftover energy of a just-ended HR meeting. Dozens of employees lingered near the coffee machines, chatting in hushed but intense tones about corporate restructuring rumors. At the center of this social orbit stood Karen Whitfield. Mid-50s, a master of posture and precision. Her navy suit fit like armor, her hair a perfectly maintained helmet of authority. People didn't just notice her, they calculated their proximity to her, knowing it could mean the difference between opportunity and trouble. Danielle's arrival was like a ripple in the breakroom's current. She didn't wear corporate camouflage. She wasn't holding a company-branded mug. She carried warmth and casualness into a space built on hierarchy and silent codes. Karen's gaze found her instantly. The look was quick but cutting, an unbroken line from Danielle's sneakers to her face, then back down again. It wasn't curiosity. It was appraisal. And the result of that appraisal was clear: she didn't belong. Danielle offered a polite smile, the universal gesture of harmlessness. But in that moment, she realized this wasn't going to be a quick drop-off. She could feel it. The air had a new weight, one she recognized from other places, other times when she had walked into rooms she wasn't supposed to be in. Office conversations are like small fires, they need oxygen to survive. But when drama enters the room, those fires die instantly. Conversations burned out as eyes shifted to the new center of attention. The analysts at the coffee machine stopped pouring. A man near the vending machine shifted his stance just enough to see better. Someone's phone, held casually at waist level, tilted slightly toward the scene. These were the witnesses. Not active participants. Not defenders. Just consumers of the moment. Danielle shifted her grip on the takeout bag, feeling the heat still radiating through the paper. She stepped forward, trying to slice cleanly through the tension. But Karen moved first. It wasn't an obvious lunge. just a subtle repositioning. Enough to block the natural path into the room, forcing Danielle to acknowledge her presence. In corporate spaces, power doesn't always announce itself with volume. Sometimes it's in the quiet control of space, the unspoken message, "You will go no further unless I allow it." The glass of water had been sitting on the counter, condensation sliding down its sides, pooling into a ring on the laminate surface. It left the counter in one smooth motion, lifted, tilted, released. The trajectory was perfect. Droplets caught in the fluorescent light, scattering into sharp, cold impact. The shock of temperature hit before the humiliation fully registered. The paper bag sagged further, grease darkening as moisture spread. Danielle blinked against the sting, holding herself perfectly still. It is one thing to be attacked. It is another to be abandoned. No one moved. Not the man with the coffee cup, not the woman nearest the napkins. Their silence was its own act. An agreement to let the scene play out without interference. Danielle stood alone, the only sound in her ears the faint hum of the vending machine and the dripping of water onto tile. When the water hit, there was no gasp from the crowd. No shouted objection. Only the faint patter of droplets meeting the floor. It was as though the breakroom had fallen into a vacuum, sucking away all sound except the steady rhythm of humiliation dripping from Danielle's hair. A thin line of water traced the curve of her jaw, pausing at the corner of her mouth before sliding down her neck. Each bead seemed to move in slow motion, heavy with meaning. The wet cotton of her t-shirt clung to her skin, cooling rapidly under the building's aggressive air conditioning. She felt the chill more in the quiet, as if silence itself amplified sensation. Her gaze scanned the room, not seeking help, she already knew it wouldn't come. But trying to anchor herself in something familiar. Instead, she saw eyes quickly dart away, mouths tightening into neutral lines, people pretending to busy themselves with imaginary tasks. The woman nearest the napkin dispenser stepped aside, creating space between herself and the wet intruder, as if distance could erase association. A man fiddled with the coffee pot, pouring himself a refill he didn't need, his movements overly deliberate. In that moment, Danielle realized the water wasn't just meant to humiliate. It was meant to isolate. To mark her as someone untouchable in this room's social hierarchy. And the most chilling part? It was working. The door to the breakroom swung open with an authority all its own, the kind that came from weight and habit. Two men in dark uniforms stepped in, their black shoes squeaking softly against the tile. Each carried a radio clipped to their shoulder, cords snaking into earpieces that kept them connected to some larger network of command. Their presence shifted the energy instantly. Employees who had been pretending not to watch now fully turned toward the scene, their earlier caution melting into open curiosity. Security wasn't subtle, it was spectacle. The taller guard's gaze landed first on Danielle, then on the spreading puddle at her feet. His expression didn't change, but there was a moment, the smallest pause, before he stepped forward. The second guard scanned the room, eyes moving from face to face, landing briefly on Karen. She stood with her arms folded, her expression perfectly composed, as if she were merely an impartial observer in all this. No one pointed, but the invisible lines of power were clear. The guard's posture shifted subtly toward Karen, waiting for her cue. She gave it with a small nod. A gesture so slight it could be mistaken for nothing at all, but in this room it was in order. They didn't touch her. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they flanked her, guiding her toward the door in a way that looked voluntary from a distance. But every step carried the unspoken reality, she was being removed. The walk from the breakroom to the elevator seemed endless. Cubicles lined the path like silent jury boxes, their occupants peeking out over partitions to catch a glimpse. Some wore open curiosity, others the guilty look of people relieved it wasn't them. Danielle kept her eyes forward. Each step squished softly in her damp sneakers, the sound amplified in her own ears. Her shirt clung tighter now, the chill settling deep into her bones. The paper bag in her hand was falling apart, the bottom threatening to give way. She tightened her grip, not because she needed the food anymore, but because it was the only thing in this moment that was hers. The elevator opened onto the ground floor with its marble tiles and towering glass windows. The lobby was a place designed to impress, polished surfaces reflecting both light and status. But today, it reflected something else. The spectacle of a wet, silent woman walking between two uniformed men. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A receptionist glanced up from her screen, eyes widening before she quickly lowered them again. Danielle's sneakers left faint waterprints on the floor, a trail marking her passage for anyone who cared to follow it with their eyes. Outside, the heat shimmered, promising a wall of humidity just beyond the glass doors. But inside, the air remained sharp and cold, indifferent to human discomfort. The timing was almost cruel in its perfection. As the security guards neared the revolving doors, Marcus Brooks was stepping inside from the blinding sunlight. His suit jacket was slung over one arm, his tie loosened against the day's oppressive heat. He was mid-smile, likely rehearsing the warm greeting he would give his wife when he saw her. The smile collapsed instantly when he took in the scene. Danielle, wet and silent, flanked by security. He didn't rush forward. Marcus had spent too many years in corporate spaces to move without assessing first. His eyes darted between the guards, the paper bag in Danielle's hand, the sheen of water on her skin. Then they landed on Karen Whitfield, who had followed the procession down. Marcus's voice was calm but carried an edge that cut through the lobby's hum. "What's going on here?" It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The question landed like a challenge, pulling every pair of eyes in the lobby toward him. Karen stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. Her answer was rehearsed before she spoke it, though the exact words would be chosen to fit the moment. The security guards remained silent, their role reduced now to presence, not speech. Danielle didn't speak either. She knew the power of silence in moments like this, how it could force others to reveal themselves. For a moment, no one moved. The lobby was suspended between action and inaction, a fragile pause that could shatter in any direction. Marcus's eyes stayed on Karen's. Hers didn't waver. This was no misunderstanding, it was a power struggle. And in that quiet battle of gazes, the story began to write itself for every onlooker. The heat from outside pressed against the glass walls, but inside, the temperature felt colder than ever. Somewhere in the distance, a phone rang. No one answered. And then, only then, did Danielle take a single step closer to her husband, the paper bag still in her hand, the scent of lunch now faint beneath the lingering smell of chlorine-tinged tap water. What happened next would turn this isolated humiliation into a story that spread far beyond the walls of Northbridge Technologies. The lobby remained a glass box of unspoken questions. No one dared to break the spell, not Marcus, not Danielle, not even Karen. Marcus's jaw was set, the muscles flexing rhythmically as if each silent second required physical restraint. Karen's lips pressed together in a thin, self-satisfied line, her stillness calculated to project control. The security guards had shifted their weight subtly, 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, a stance that suggested readiness without outright aggression. Their eyes, though, betrayed a kind of uncertainty. As if they knew they were part of something larger, something that didn't fit neatly into a security incident report. The paper bag in Danielle's hand gave a soft, crinkling sigh as she adjusted her grip. Inside, the sandwich was now cold, its warmth long stolen by the air conditioning and the slow march from humiliation to public display. Somewhere above them, the faint ding of an elevator sounded, but no one moved to see who had arrived. It was as if the whole building understood. The story was here, in this moment, and until it played out, the world beyond these glass doors could wait. It was Karen who moved first, though barely. A shift of one heel, a deliberate turn of the head toward Marcus, slow enough to be dramatic, quick enough to seem casual. Her voice didn't come yet. This was still the silent theater of dominance. In corporate spaces, the first one to speak often lost the upper hand, unless the timing was perfect. Marcus didn't mirror her movement. His stillness was its own weapon. He allowed the air to thicken, allowed the eyes in the room to swing like pendulums between them. The receptionist's hand hovered over her keyboard, frozen mid-gesture, as though typing during this moment might break some unwritten rule. A single bead of water slipped from the end of Danielle's hair, landing on the marble with a sound so small it somehow seemed amplified in the cavernous space. Karen noticed it. Everyone did. But only Marcus's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again, returning to the contest. When Karen finally spoke, it wasn't to Marcus. Her words, calm, deliberate, just loud enough for the room to hear, were aimed at the security guards. Please escort her out. For words, but they were laced with a theater of authority, meant to signal to the onlookers that she had nothing to fear, no explanation to give. Marcus stepped forward then. Not rushing, but with a precision that seemed to shift the gravity in the room. The guards hesitated, their heads turning toward him instinctively. His gaze locked on Karen. He didn't raise his voice, didn't allow even a hint of anger to cloud it. The sharpness was in the control. You will not touch my wife. The phrase hung in the air like a verdict, its calmness more disarming than a shout. Karen's expression flickered, just barely, before returning to that practiced mask of composure. The lobby's bystanders had been frozen observers, but Marcus's words changed something. You could almost feel the weight redistribute, like a table tilting slightly when someone shifts in their chair. It wasn't that anyone openly took sides. No one in corporate America risked that in the moment. But glances grew bolder. Eyes lingered longer on Karen, as though each person was mentally recording her reaction for later replay over coffee or text message. Karen, of course, was trained in surviving such shifts. She had learned long ago that authority wasn't about winning every look or every whisper, it was about maintaining the appearance of being unshaken. Her fingers brushed the sleeve of her blazer, a subtle self-adjustment, as if removing an invisible speck of lint. The movement was unnecessary but intentional, a micro-performance of composure. Danielle didn't move. Her body, still damp, carried the weight of both physical discomfort and the awareness that this was now a public trial. And in public trials, even silence was interpreted. The air in the lobby had changed texture. It was still cold, still conditioned, but now it carried the faint metallic taste of tension, the kind you could feel in the back of your throat. Marcus took one small step closer to Danielle, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. It wasn't just proximity. It was a statement of alignment, of protection. Every onlooker saw it. So did Karen. Karen responded with stillness. Not the relaxed kind, but the rigid stillness of someone refusing to concede ground. Her chin tilted a fraction higher, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. In the polished reflection of the lobby's glass walls, the scene doubled an echo of itself in light and shadow. Security remained between them, their faces schooled into neutrality, but their bodies betrayed a readiness for movement at any second. Marcus could have escalated. Every muscle in his frame suggested he wanted to. But escalation would have been Karen's victory, it would have transformed the narrative into one about aggression instead of humiliation. Instead, he pivoted. His voice was even, almost quiet, but every word was a blade. My wife will leave when she is ready, not when you command it. The sentence cut through the lobby's hum, halting even the faint tapping of the receptionist's keyboard. Karen's mouth opened, but she closed it again. Sometimes words cost too much to spend. Danielle lowered her gaze, not out of shame, but to shield herself from the room's collective stare. Her hands tightened around the weakening paper bag, holding together what little remained of the lunch that had started this cascade. Karen knew when to withdraw. And more importantly, how to make it look like she wasn't retreating. She exhaled slowly, let her gaze pass over Marcus as though he were an unremarkable fixture in the room, and turned toward the elevators. To the untrained eye, it seemed like she was simply returning to work, too important to linger in petty confrontations. But for those paying closer attention, the timing of her exit betrayed a truth: she had no more ground to gain here. The guards looked to her for instruction as she walked away. She gave none, which in itself was an instruction, a silent signal to let the matter fade, at least for now. Marcus didn't move until she was gone. Even then, his steps were measured, his arms sliding around Danielle's shoulders in a gesture that was both intimate and defiant. They exited the glass doors together. The Atlanta heat hit them like a physical force, thick and heavy after the refrigerated cold inside. The sun glared off the building's mirrored exterior, making them squint as they stepped onto the stone plaza. Behind them, the reflections of curious faces could be seen in the lobby windows, employees pretending to work while stealing a final look at the drama unfolding outside. Marcus didn't speak right away. Neither did Danielle. Sometimes the act of moving from one environment to another, from cold marble to hot pavement, created its own necessary silence. The street hummed with traffic, the sound oddly grounding after the sharp stillness of the lobby. Danielle breathed in the heavy air, tasting exhaust and city grit. It was unpleasant, but at least it was hers. They reached Marcus's car in the lower level of the parking deck. The echo of their footsteps bounced off concrete pillars, a softer rhythm than the sharp lobby clicks. Marcus unlocked the door but didn't get in. He leaned against the hood, the metal hot even in the shade, and finally looked at Danielle fully. She was still damp, her hair clinging in strands to her cheek. Her shirt bore a darker patch where water had soaked deepest. Neither of them asked the obvious, "Are you okay?" because they both knew the answer didn't matter right now. Instead, Marcus simply said, "We're not letting this go." That statement wasn't impulsive. Marcus had been in enough high-stakes situations to understand the difference between reaction and resolution. Danielle studied his face. The determination there wasn't just about her, it was about a principle he refused to compromise on. She nodded once, the motion small but significant. It was agreement, but also consent to whatever came next. Because what came next would not be easy. The air in the parking deck was heavy, smelling faintly of oil and sun-baked asphalt. Above them, a car door slammed, the sound carrying down the concrete ramp like a warning bell. The drive home was quiet. Atlanta traffic moved in its usual fits and starts, the sun casting long shadows across the freeway. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on Danielle's knee. It wasn't a gesture of possession, it was anchoring, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Billboards flashed past, advertising summer concerts and law firms that fight for you. Danielle caught herself staring at one for a moment longer than necessary. The hum of the tires on asphalt filled the car, steady and low. It was the kind of sound that gave thoughts too much room to wander. Home brought warmth, but not peace. The air was heavy with the scent of leftover dinner Marcus had reheated from the night before. Danielle showered, the water running hotter than necessary, as if heat could erase the chill of earlier. The steam fogged the mirror, hiding her reflection. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, the blue glow reflecting in his glasses. He wasn't scrolling aimlessly. He was reading. Researching. They didn't speak much that night, but their silence was no longer the brittle quiet of the lobby. This was the quiet of planning. The first call went out the next morning. Marcus dialed with the precision of someone who had rehearsed the number in his head all night. He spoke clearly, laying out the events in order, leaving nothing to misinterpretation. Danielle listened from across the room, her coffee cooling untouched in her hands. The voice on the other end took notes. Promised to follow up. Asked for copies of anything documenting the incident. Marcus agreed, but he knew promises on the phone were only the first step. The real battle was yet to come, and it wouldn't be fought in lobbies or parking lots. Waiting was its own kind of battle. Once the call was made, time stopped belonging to Marcus and Danielle. It now moved on the clock of the process, a slow, grinding machine with no urgency for the human heart. Danielle sat by the living room window, watching the shadows shift across the street. She checked her phone too many times already, hoping for a missed call, an email, anything. Marcus moved between rooms. Not pacing, exactly, more like a soldier keeping a perimeter. He didn't want to seem anxious, but the restless energy betrayed him. Outside, Atlanta moved on. Neighbors came and went. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Somewhere, life was still unfolding at its usual pace, a cruel contrast to the suspended reality inside their home. The email came at 11:43 a.m. Subject line, regarding incident on July 15. The sender was an HR representative from the company, not Karen, of course, but someone speaking on her behalf. The language was clinical, almost sterile. We are in receipt of your account of the events. We take such matters seriously. We will be conducting a review. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a promise to review. Marcus read it twice, then a third time. The subtext was obvious, they were preparing their defense. That evening, Marcus called in a favor. An old friend, now an attorney in the city, agreed to come by. They sat at the dining table, papers spread out between them. The printed email, Marcus's notes, Danielle's written account. The friend read in silence, tapping the edge of the page with his finger when he came across certain phrases. This isn't going to be quick, he finally said. They'll try to control the narrative. You need to document everything. Dates, times, even the expressions on people's faces. Danielle swallowed hard. The idea of reliving the moment in that level of detail made her chest tighten. Karen was not idle during this time. Inside the glass tower, she was already working her angles, controlling who spoke to whom, deciding which version of the story would survive in the company's bloodstream. Her office door was open more than usual, an unspoken invitation for people to drop in and hear her side. Each retelling was slightly different, tailored to the listener's disposition. Some heard about a misunderstanding. Others heard about an unprovoked outburst. In every version, Karen was calm, professional, unflappable. The story wasn't just being investigated. It was being rewritten in real time. Word of the incident didn't stay confined to the building. Employees talked. Friends of friends repeated it over drinks. By the end of the week, strangers in entirely different departments had opinions on what really happened. Danielle began receiving quiet messages from people she didn't know well. Some expressed sympathy. Others offered vague warnings. A few hinted they had their own experiences with Karen. Each message was another piece in a puzzle she hadn't asked to assemble. The official meeting request came on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject, fact-finding discussion. The date was set for the following Monday at 9 a.m. Marcus studied the wording. Fact-finding sounded neutral, but it also sounded like a trap. They prepared the entire weekend. Every question Marcus could think of, every answer Danielle might give, every detail they could anchor to something documented. They knew going in that this wasn't about telling the truth. It was about surviving the telling of it. The conference room was smaller than expected, the blinds drawn tight. A long table separated Danielle from the two HR representatives. Karen was not present. A deliberate choice to appear impartial. The questions were direct but loaded. Can you walk us through the events as you remember them? Did you, at any point, raise your voice? How did you respond when security approached? Danielle answered slowly, not from hesitation, but to ensure precision. Every pause, every glance to Marcus, was calculated. By the end, the HR rep smiled politely, thanked her for her time, and said, "We'll be in touch." The door closed behind them with a quiet finality. The waiting was worse the second time. Now, they weren't just anticipating contact, they were anticipating judgment. Days passed without word. The world outside kept spinning, Atlanta traffic, evening thunderstorms, children playing in the street. But inside, every minute was heavy. Marcus checked his phone obsessively. Danielle stopped checking hers altogether. The not knowing became its own kind of fatigue. News doesn't always travel through official channels first. It was a friend of a friend, someone still inside the building, who messaged Marcus late at night. I think they're leaning toward calling it a misunderstanding. Karen's already talking like it's over. Marcus didn't reply right away. He read the message 3 times before showing it to Danielle. They both knew what it meant, the truth was losing. Marcus made the decision the next morning. If the internal process was going to bury them, the court of public opinion would not. He began making calls to community leaders, to journalists he knew from previous work. Not with wild accusations, but with careful, measured accounts backed by detail. The story started small, a post on a local blog, then a segment on an independent radio station. But it grew. Within a week, Danielle's face was on the evening news. The footage of her leaving the lobby, wet shirt clinging to her shoulders, became the image that carried the story forward. Once the story went public, silence was no longer an option for the company. An official statement was released: "We do not condone any form of inappropriate behavior. We are committed to a respectful and inclusive workplace." The language was vague, but the damage was done. Investors called. Clients asked questions. Employees whispered openly now. Inside the glass tower, Karen's open-door policy closed. She was no longer in control of the narrative. The resolution didn't come in a dramatic press conference or a televised apology. It came in a short email from HR: "The matter has been concluded. Appropriate actions have been taken." Karen was no longer with the company. No further details were provided. Marcus and Danielle sat in their kitchen, the message open on his laptop. They didn't celebrate. The victory was real, but so was the cost. Outside, the Atlanta evening was warm, the cicadas loud in the trees. Life went on. And somewhere in the city, another story was beginning, one that, someday, would need its own telling. Security, arrest this woman immediately. The words still echo in the mind long after the lobby has emptied. The sound of them, sharp and public, was meant to do more than remove someone from a building. It was meant to mark them. Brand them. The marble floor had been slick with the water she'd poured. Not in anger, but in defiance of a moment meant to humiliate her. Eyes had turned. Phones had tilted upward, catching the scene in digital permanence. And you, yes, you watching this now. What would you have done? Would you have walked away quietly, swallowing the sting of injustice? Would you have spoken up, even knowing the odds were against you? Or would you have stood, frozen, unsure whether the next move would be your salvation or your ruin? This is not just Danielle's story. It's a story about every moment where dignity collides with power. Where the decision to stay silent or to fight changes everything. So tell me, where are you watching from right now? Atlanta? Chicago? Lagos? London? Somewhere quiet, or somewhere loud enough that you have to turn the volume down just to hear me? Because this conversation isn't ending here. If you've ever been in a moment like this, or know someone who has, you already know how rare it is for the truth to survive the telling. And that's why these stories need to be told, again and again, until no one can pretend they don't happen. Make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because the next time those words ring out, "Security, arrest this woman immediately," you might just be the one deciding what happens next.